Good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Maria, and welcome to, I would say, a long-awaited event, considering the growing concern of mobile payments in our market, for mobile payments in our market. Okay, let's start the questions. First of all, why do you think mobile payments, which follow the same model as Alipay, Venmo, and is also operated by the banks in Nordics, haven't really taken off in Romania yet?
When talking about mobile payments, we're talking about the future. I think we're not ready yet, but we're getting there. We're working on this. On the Revolut side, we're working, and we hope to launch very soon.
So if you want to use factual data, looking at these other very diverse markets with a lot of cash, a large cash economy, the fact was that if you asked people the same question in these markets, the dynamics would look a lot like Romania, and everyone would say, this will never work here. So I think everyone that we talked to about mobile payments, and this applies to Romania as well, I had conversations earlier before we started the panel, and the typical notion is that, well, we are different. It doesn't really work for us because we are different. So learning from all the other markets, I think Romania is more than ready. You have a big cash economy. That's a great argument for launching mobile payments. It's not the problem, it's an opportunity to digitize it. But it proves that if you provide good services in a nice way and you wrap it the right way, people will adopt it. I mean, you wouldn't be here unless Revolut was doing okay and you're growing. So that just proves that when you give something to the people in a nice way that they really want to use, they start to use it.
Back in 2010, 2009, where we were prepared for the iPhone, right? It was a phone with just one button, yeah, right? Because if we bring to the market, I think easier, ways of payment without going to the bank, and with easier, let's say, onboarding, easier usage, yeah, and a lot of features that could be, how to say, adapted for them.
I think it's a relevant, question that Romania is ready or not ready. In my opinion, when you're having population of 18 to 25, 18 to 30 that are natives in terms of using mobiles, in terms of using actually everything without needing extra education because they educate us, meaning actually their opinion is giving us the feedback. So it's a bit patronizing to say that the country is not ready. Okay, not everybody in the country is ready. Not every part of the country is ready, but there is a mass and a very significant part of the market that is asking for it. Now, for me, it's also a matter of supply, meaning who is supplying mobile payments. So for me, there is a market.
The question reminds me of a similar situation 20 years ago, when the mobile operators came into Romania and started to build the mobile infrastructure. And everybody says, are you crazy guys? Romania is in the middle age of communication. What are you doing? Yeah? And in 6 months, we had the fastest growing penetration rate in Europe. Why? Because Romanians are technologically addicted. Yeah? If you give them something which is friendly, nice to use, and so on, they will embrace it. The question is, what is that technology that will make us say that's it?
What about Google Pay or Apple Pay? When they'll be available in Romania, most likely Google will be first this year, from my knowing. Do you think the banks will be better off working together with them, or instead of developing their own mobile payment projects?
It doesn't really matter which brand it is, because at the end of the day, it's a standardized piece of technology that anyone can deploy. Everyone in the room has heard about Apple Pay, you've heard about Google Pay, you've heard about these NFC-based wallets, because they've been marketed very aggressively by the providers of these solutions. Starbucks is the most used mobile payment service in the US, and it's more popular in number of users than Apple Pay, more popular than Google Pay, more popular than any of the bank-issued NFC wallets. Why is that? And we believe we know why, because we can look at the other successful schemes. It is because it's solving problems both for the consumer and for the merchant. And then the technology piece, the mechanics of how you do it, is not important anymore. So you're trying to solve a problem that does not exist. The real problem, which we've learned from all the successful schemes, are all the other situations. The problem is not how you pay at the terminal, the problem is the terminal itself.
Even if you want to pay It's also about to educate the merchants and the cashiers and so on, and it's another story because it's not easy.
Okay, but now
Yeah.
are you working on it?
Yes, we are looking to all solutions, but let's say having the past experience, yeah, we wanted to learn something, you know, to be careful and to learn something that for real will have a success.
First of all, for me, the mobile payments need to be something that the customers want in order to replace something. So if the mobile payment is just a need to replace your contactless payment, it doesn't really make such a wow sense. So in TPI, we're looking at it from building a very nice wallet and adding the payments. We have seen that there is big appetite actually for payments. Now, as I said before, you know, people will not know what they want until they see it in front of them.
I will have the same questions to the bank. You know, because definitely Google Pay and Apple Pay will be here sooner or later. If we, the local market, will find solution to these weaknesses and will put in the market solutions which will give customer trust and convenience, then Google Pay and Apple Pay will be just another player in the market.
Sadly, post PSD2, so September 2019, all of the entities we just talked about, Apple, Google, Amazon now also confirmed that they applied for a license out of Sweden. All of these players, they will all have PISP and AISP rights, meaning that they can become the primary interface.
That's why we are believing in mobile payments, because we are seeing, you know, the growth of the usage of the mobile banking application, and the mobile is becoming the preferred channel for the customer.
You know, so you need to think like the fintechs. You cannot just have, you know, a boring application which just says send money, you know, receive money, check the balance. That's dead. It's as simple as it is. So it needs to have something that, you know, Google cannot do or Google can do, but you assume that you have your own customers, your own database, and you will promote yourself, you will be there when they need you, and actually hope for the best and, you know, really give a fight for it. So there's no other way.
It was not free, it was not cheap, it was not easy. But once you reach the saturation point, and we know what the saturation point is, then it starts to go viral and grow by itself. But you have to educate people. But the risk reward is tremendous.
I'm not talking about the financial reward here, I'm talking about the impact and the social impact you're bringing in the market in which you're operating, because you're actually changing the market and changing mindsets and changing mentalities. But there are number twos who come up, who build on the existing market solutions and come up with an innovative solution, come up with an actual solution to a real problem of the users, and then it's good. It's good for the number two and it's good for the number one, because competition forces the number one to also keep innovating and to keep developing and not waiting and saying, okay, I'm number one, I have the market, I don't care about the rest. I think competition is good. The mission of people that are educating the market in Eastern Europe is much harder, particularly in tech, particularly in fintech, because the trust here is lower. People don't trust new services, and the tech savviness is lower as well. So the mission here is much harder, and you need much more effort, a lot of commitment. You need to be authentic, and you need to constantly communicate with the users in order to succeed in the East versus the West.
What is important is to bring you know, a service which is relevant also for the customer, and we are perceived as very secure, and people are trusting us. It is very important.
You know, what we have the biggest equity is trust.
There is only two chances, let's say, to survive in 2 years from now. First is to match a similar customer experience, as Daniel said, with the Google Pay or Apple Pay or so on. And second is differentiation. What can you do and Google Pay cannot do? What can you do and Apple Pay cannot do? So think about this.
Because most of the core is not the banks. I mean, it's Visa, it's MasterCard, it's the SEPA rails, it's these core components that are not owned or controlled by the banks. You just have to have a license to get access to them. I do think, and by experience from other markets, there are still a certain amount of trust by the population and the businesses given to banks. But I don't think that's a finite resource. I think the trust thing there is progressing very fast. Facebook knows much more sensitive, dangerous, personal stuff about you than the money part. If they were to deal with your money, they would be regulated just as rigorously as these guys. So we have to turn our heads around and say, this is what they're going to do.
No, but about trust, trust me, we are making some studies, yeah. And for example, because we try to see why customers are enrolling cards, you know, and make let's say in-app payments, yeah.
How many of you think your bank is cool?
It's too early to say that.
The good news with mobile payments is that there's no sensitive information flying around. Your card is never exchanged with anyone.
So, I don't want to cut your wings, guys. But when it comes about Romania, I will tell you something very particular. Regulation, which is not like in other countries. And I'm referring to fiscal regulation, yeah? Because, you know, I feel this on my skin every day. Working with local and central authorities in Romania, regulation in Romania is quite tough. Yeah. So we want everything on paper. If it is not on paper, almost it does not exist. Yeah. So this is what we are fighting with. That's why regulation should be seriously taken into consideration when we are trying to do something in this market. I am an optimistic guy. I will do everything I can for digitalization, mobile payments, and everything else.
So I'll be more than happy to be challenged to meet the regulators and talk through these issues. We can solve every single one of them, and we've done it before.
I have two comments and questions. First, Titus from Elo. There is a confusion here, and it's very early and let's say a little bit Don Quixote-esque to say that the banks in 20 years, not 5, will not be here. Come on, banks will be here. Payments, we discuss payments here, not and payments is peanuts business for the major banks. Okay, they will be out of the payments, but the real business of the banks is financing. What about your internal cost of finance? Let's beat banks in this side. So this is one angle.
If you're a bank in China, you have a huge problem because 850 million people are using a service from a non-bank type of company. Well, payments is the #1 frequency of use driver for interaction between you and your financial institution. You need the attention of the user. If you don't have the attention of the user, you can't sell them shit because they don't see you.
Everybody talks about trust in Romania, and that's a big issue for me. George knows also the regulation. But what made my parents to use Uber? What made me to use Uber? What made all my friends, all old-fashioned friends in Romania to use Uber? The service. Because Uber, it's less acceptable to use it as a trust, partner compared with a bank, isn't it? But the service, because the lack of services that we had on the taxis, everybody hates taxi in Romania, I hate taxi in Bucharest, and you hate it also, even in my town, made me to build that trust. So when you discuss about where do you put yourself above the other services, it's only about the experience.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.